Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
So, Dan, last week we alluded a little bit to this presentation that we gave, and we had this mic that we were passing around. I remember having this thought at the end of it. It's like, thank God we didn't have any hot mic moments where we didn't say something that we didn't want this ballroom of people to hear. Oh gosh, that was a lot of fun. I'm really glad we did that.
Yes, very much so.
So
That was,
for those of you who don't know, we did a presentation. We talked a little bit of it, talked a little bit about it in our previous episode, but it was on moral injury and the treatment of this particular kind of set of hurts that people carry around after they've maybe hurt someone or failed to prevent harm. So if you're interested, go back and you can certainly listen to that. And Dan, were you say more? I'm sorry, interrupted.
No. Just the idea that of how much harder it is sometimes to cope with the things that we ourselves have done. Like it's one thing to cope with things that are done to us, and that's, I don't mean in any way minimize the pain of having some type of traumatic event or thing that happened to us, but often for the clients we're working with, the recognition that I have transgressed or I have done something that hurt someone is really, really hard to cope with, and that's what the presentation was about, this concept of moral injury and what we sometimes call the hurt caused by the hurt caused.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a fun and interesting conversation to have with this group of psychologists, but also really important to the work we do.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of sorry, go ahead, Gayle.
I just was going to say, I always enjoy the Minnesota Psychological Association's annual conference and connecting with psychologists and professionals that I don't see on a daily basis. It's really just, it's a hoot to have them all in the same room and be able to sit down and chat and enjoy some time together.
I was curious, and I got to listen to the presentation as Gayle was warming up, at least her portion of it. So
yeah, you heard a half of it.
One thing that occurred to me just hearing you talk about it now is I wonder if there's any connection with moral injury and kind of survivor's guilt, where it's not. Yeah. Okay, there is. Okay.
Absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
You nailed it. I mean, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's a type of moral injury, survivor guilt. This idea that like I made it out of this thing and other people didn't, and and sometimes it's what could I have done to save them. Sometimes it's like what right do I have to be in this situation that's so much better than theirs? Yeah, survivor guilt absolutely is one of the categories, and I talked about it in the first. What you missed, Michael, was Gayle talked mostly about the treatment of and the symptoms of. I talked about the kind of history of the diagnosis and identifying it. So,
gotcha. Thanks. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks to everybody else for joining us. For anybody who's new out there and they don't know what they've stumbled into and they're just learning about moral injury for the first time, this is typically a podcast where I found a scenario out there on the internet where somebody has essentially asked readers, who's the asshole here? And Doctors MacBride and Kessler are going to weigh in and give us their opinions. In general, I've tried to de-identify the posts a bit. And as always, and also, I guess if you're new, stick around through the credits. We always have some kind of bonus conversation. So do you guys have anything to add before we dive in?
No.
No, I'm excited to hear the scenario that you're going to bring us. As clinical psychologists, lots of different things walk into our door, as it were. We're a fully telehealth practice, so I guess it's really not coming through our door per se, but come to us, and our job is to have a wide breadth of knowledge and ability to sit in with and hear a number of things. And so that's what we're kind of trying to do today, with a little bit of the intent to entertain and educate. And, quite frankly, Dan and I just really love to have these sort of case consulting conversations anyway. So yeah, what have you got for us today, Michael?
Sure. Well, this is perhaps an oddball one, but we'll see. I don't know. I find these things and they appeal to me, and I'm always kind of curious to see what you say. So we'll see where we go with this. The headline here on this one is, "Am I the asshole for sharing a funny story with a new hire?"
Probably.
Maybe we need HR involved. If you're writing in this forum, it clearly failed, and you wanted to consult with HR. But go on.
I'm just gonna say yes. I'm a probabilities guy, and I'm like, totally agree with you. If you're writing this in this setting, and you've told a story that, like, if you're telling a story in the workplace that you have a question about whether or not you're an asshole for telling the story in the workplace, you probably are an asshole, or if you weren't an asshole, you made a mistake by telling that story. Any story you tell in the workplace, you should be like ironclad sure that this is an okay story to tell in the workplace. I'm interested in hearing the story. I'm not making
It
the
might be a really
judgment
short
yet.
conversation.
I'm accurate. Yeah, I'm not making the judgment yet, but were I a betting man, and I kind of am, yeah, you probably are. But go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So the poster is, if it matters, 25 female. And so she says, I work full time in the admissions office of a large university, overseeing both the front desk and our call center. One day, a student worker and I stumbled upon an application in our records under the name of Poopy McPooper Steenberg. Finding it amusing, I shared a screenshot in our team group chat expecting some laughs. However, our head of communications privately reprimanded me, stating that such actions didn't reflect leadership qualities and urged me to be more professional. A few weeks later, while introducing a new student worker to our department, I recounted the Poopy McPooper Steenberg incident, thinking it would be a lighthearted anecdote. Later that day, I received a stern email from the assistant director of admissions, labeling my story as highly inappropriate and accusing me of divulging sensitive information, even CCing my boss. Subsequently, my boss also expressed disappointment over the email, feeling blindsided and considering the story harmless. I now wonder, am I the asshole for sharing this funny story with the new hire in the first place?
So let me walk backwards. So
There's so many go ahead. Yeah, please.
no, I just the email from the poster's boss was one of disappointment in the employee that's posting, or in the, okay, not the upper leaders. So they're in agreement with
Yes,
upper leadership.
correct.
Yeah, there are. Dan, you started to say there are layers to this. Go ahead.
But there are two different places here. The first spot is sharing it in the group chat with the, like, Poopy McPooperstein or whatever it is. It's obviously some one who has decided to make a joke application. And if you're sharing that with other people in the admissions office, that's fine. I have no issue with that. Now, she got reprimanded in a way that's the part that I'm a little annoyed by the reprimand. That's problematic. But then when she shared the reprimand story, now that is where I think she crossed the line in sharing the reprimand story.
Yeah, she had been clearly told by the supervisory team that this is not a story that they want circulating. And there may be a lot of reasons for that.
Right.
But yeah, she really probably should have just tucked that one, put it to bed, be done with it. I get that you think it's funny because it's a goofy name with a joke application. There's no way that that can be serious.
Mhm.
And I can totally see why she thought it was harmless to share, because it's so
Mhm.
surprising. Is I guess I can't imagine people paying the fees that are often associated with
Not
applications.
anymore.
They-
Many colleges don't have
Oh.
an application fee anymore.
Well, they do, but they will have windows of time where they will waive them as
Okay.
if it's like unspecial. So now we
Right.
do higher education on a bargain. I don't know. It's bizarre, but okay, fine. But yeah, why even put that kind of time into it? I would not imagine that you get a lot of those. But
No.
and so it's not real. And so now you have these upper admissions people worried about what, sharing sensitive information. There's nothing to share here because it cannot be a real
No.
a real application in any way, shape, or form. But she did cross a line when she reshared it after being told, like, this is not how we want to represent our department.
Mhm. No, this is, and I think that, so there are two different motivations for sharing these things. The first is that, gosh, this is funny.
Hmm.
The second sounds like do you believe that they chastised me for sharing this thing that was funny? And
Yeah.
that's a totally different thing. It's not about the poopy Mick, whatever it is. It's now about, I got chastised by my boss for this thing. That one is really out of line, at least in my interpretation of the way it went
That's
down. That
a
one,
really good way to kind of parse the difference in what happened between those two things. I appreciate that take on it. I hadn't quite articulated it, but that really
uh,
is.
So where I'm annoyed at the boss for not going, not my favorite story, but whatever. Like that one, I think there was a bit of an overreaction. But then to share, like, my boss yelled at me for this. I did this
Mhm.
funny thing and my boss yelled at me. That's not okay for the workplace. That's a
Yeah.
conversation to have with that boss or that boss's boss, whoever it was, more privately.
Hmm.
Um, and to understand differently and better. That one bothered me a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed in the choice to share it in general because you do have a number of student workers. It doesn't really reflect
I
well on the department and
Yeah,
kind of your
right.
judgment. But I get like this person's also 25. They're not that far removed from the age of the students that they're working with as student workers versus I assume full-time employee. So I kind of get the temptation. I also am a little bit troubled that this individual thought it was appropriate to send essentially this thing to the entire team. And I don't know how big this is, but now you've got like this group chat going on about this goofy thing. And it feels like something that if I were going to share it, I would share it more one-on-one and pick my audience as opposed to blasting it out there. I think there's a little bit of lack of judgment in sharing it in the teams to begin with.
Yeah, and then this is sort of the other thing about this, why I'm not as troubled by her sharing this. I mean, yeah, should she have shared it? Probably not.
Mm-mm.
Is it
Mhm.
a big deal? Like, this is a pop culture sort of a thing here in Minnesota where we are. They had a name the snowplow contest, and Plowy McPlowface was nominated, and in fact there is, and I'm going to ask Michael to put a picture of this because you can find a picture of this plow with the MnDOT logo on the side that says Plowy McPlowface, because that's what the people chose as the name for it. It came off of a British boat that was named Boaty McBoatface a few years before. And it's kind of a, like, if I'd seen that, I would have smiled and chuckled, and or I would have just deleted it and moved on, but and not shared it. But it, like that, I just have trouble getting exercised about that initial. Maybe it wasn't the best choice to share. Maybe it was. Um, this is all sort of it starts out as a tempest in a teapot, and then it becomes an actual tempest because she shares what her boss chastised her for. Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, you missed there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I would have
yeah,
loved the boss to respond a little bit more gently, but I think in the harshness, she really felt likely pretty defensive. And then
right.
she's gathering sort of opinions to support her. And it's a bit of a defensive move, really.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So not the asshole. I don't. Which did she want to know if she was an asshole for?
Let's see. It was sharing the funny story in the first place. So the first thing, like the
Of
group chat
course,
piece.
of course. Yeah, she did. Because she didn't name the actual transgression. Sharing the
Right.
first story was a relatively minor thing, and if she wants to focus, but we see
It's a
this sometimes.
mistake.
Like, people will talk about, like, all I did was this,
Hmm.
and that's not what actually got you in trouble. What got you in trouble was all the stuff that happened. We see this in couples who argue. I said this innocuous thing, they think, and their partner
Hmm.
gets annoyed with them, and then they say something really harsh, and their partner says something that's really harsh. And when in the recounting of this, it's, I said this relatively innocuous thing, and we had this huge blow up because they got mad at me.
Yeah. No, you're right. It happens all the time. And it would just, right, you start giving what you got and hurt people, all of those things.
So, I mean, the answer to her question, if the whole story was, I shared this thing and I got in trouble for it, the answer would have been, oh, come on, why did they get? I mean, maybe you shouldn't have, but this is not a big deal. However, if she'd asked the real question, we've talked about this before,
Hmm.
Gail.
Yeah,
Sometimes
last week, same thing.
yeah, the real question is, am I an asshole for sharing that I got chastised? Yeah, you screwed up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if I answer
absolutely.
the real question, yes. If I answer the question she asked, which is the wrong question, no.
Yeah. We find a couple of things with these scenarios being posted online, right? One, the scenario as posted often will paint the poster in a better light because that's what we do as social beings, is we still want to kind of put our best foot forward. But the other one is asking the wrong question. And this week and last week is the same thing. As posted, the answer to your question is no, but you're paying attention to the wrong part of the scenario. And the part of the scenario that is really problematic is everything that came after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Michael,
That's
what did the internet have to say? Like, what
yeah,
are we
I want
missing
to
anything? Oh,
add
sorry.
one more. The first person to respond to the first email, whoever that was,
Uh-huh.
not happy with them.
Oh, yeah, minor characters, right? Or maybe not so minor.
That one, like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, maybe pull her aside privately and say, don't share stuff even if you think it's funny. But this is worthy of a minor, like, chastisement. If anything, it's not worthy of an email that
It's
sort of creates an official thread.
it's a mentoring moment, more likely. Again, this
Yes,
is a
perfect.
25-year-old.
Mhm.
This is not someone who has had a long period of time in a professional workforce, And again, I argue that a lot of the people they're surrounded with are other young people. So they may be not moving off of this sort of young person vibe, if you will, and they just needed someone to come along and say, hey, I get it, but this is not how we want to represent our department. Some of these things may come through every once in a while, and we really need you to A, handle it with discretion, and B, downplay it, because we don't need more of these crossing our desks. So, I'd
Exactly.
appreciate if not.
Perfect.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Michael, what the internet side? Gail asked you, and then I interrupted. So
That's okay. It gave me another minute to find something else for you. So, Bodie McBoatface, by the way, was named that in 2016. And then since in 2019 was the first time we had a Plowy McPlowface in Minnesota. And it has won every year. So we have had a Plowy McPlowface 2019, 2020, 2021, so on.
Do they rename the plows every year, or are they just the new plows that they're putting into circulation, or are they based by county, where like Scott County gets a Plowy McPlowface and Carver County gets a Plowy McPlowface? I'm curious.
Yes, Gail, to that.
All of that?
Yeah.
we'll answer those questions.
Yeah.
So what happened with the story, though?
Oh, yeah,
wait,
sorry.
we're going to talk about story. Sorry.
I know we're on the side quest of Plowy McPlowface, but like, what happened with the story?
Sure.
Listeners
So
want to know about Plowy McPlowface.
That's true.
the internet was the vast majority said you're the asshole, and this post is probably the best response to that. You're the asshole. Are you 5 years old? You've been told multiple times that poop jokes are not appropriate for the workplace, and yet you continue. You continue telling the same immature joke that no one laughs at after the head of communication reaches out personally and tells you to stop. You can't follow a simple boundary. You need to learn to read the room. This is not your fucking room. You have seriously damaged your rep at this workplace and are potentially on the verge of losing your job. Learn to do better. Like,
Wow. They were,
I mean,
not they're much harsher than we were, but not wrong.
but not in total disagreement.
No.
No, I think that the point of really these are poop jokes. At the end of the day, these are poop jokes. Let's grow up a little bit, even though poop jokes are funny.
Jokes are funny.
Right. But don't tell them to a conference room full of people, whether that be Teams conference room or in-person conference room, for sure. Yeah. And I do worry that this individual is in danger of losing their job. They've been reprimanded on the same issue twice. If they're not losing it, they're about to go on a performance improvement plan around the communication. This can get serious quickly.
There was and then the kind of minority dissenting voice was, you're not the asshole. And these were people who were like focused on the training situation. Training is boring, but if you find something like this that is kind of a way to break the ice with somebody and to kind of engage and build rapport, that like they assumed that's what she was trying to do. And sometimes they said like they literally created fake applications to try to be more engaging with student workers or people that they're training to do this kind of job. So
going to take issue. If you're creating a fake app to train your students, please don't call it Poopy McPoopface. There are any number of other names that you could use that would be relatively humorous. Again, this is just base humor. And I'm not knocking on poop humor. I think poop and fart humor can be funny, but in the right audience. And I don't think a student worker audience is as appropriate as a student worker. I would have been a little like, I don't know what to do with this adult who's giving me an application where the name is Poop Face.
Yeah.
I've worked in a number of customer service and training situations and that kind of thing, and it is hard, and sometimes you come across something that is so strange or catches you by surprise. I think you want to kind of get that gut check. So I know I do sympathize a bit with the initial thing. I would never have shared it to a big group like that. Like
Mm.
that is weird. I might have showed, somebody, a coworker that I felt like I had a closer
Right.
connection with, or actually
That's how you
I can
do it.
Yeah.
right. I can think of a specific example where I was working at a cable company and this person had a ridiculously large bill because of all the pornography that they paid for. And I literally, I couldn't comprehend this. And so I ended up actually going to my boss and like walking through it with them, not because like I thought it was funny, but like I was trying to understand, like, how do I talk to this person and explain that they had a cable bill that was like several $1,000s.
Oof.
And like I needed to be able to break that down for the customer. And that ended up kind of being a training thing that we would use with people, because that's an awkward conversation. We obviously de-identified the thing, so we didn't know who the customer was exactly. But internally, you do have some ability to use those materials as a training opportunity. Now, that is not at all what she is doing here. She was like, haha, this is funny.
Right.
So anyway, there's sometimes a fine line, I guess, there. But
Mhm. Mhm.
anyway.
But it sounds like we're kind of in agreement. We're in agreement with each other on this one where she crossed the line. It sounds like the internet's mostly in agreement, but not as
Mhm.
kind as we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to, put a judgment on it, it started with, well, just poor judgment, and then
Right.
she kind of found herself in sort of like this place of just sucking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm gonna call her an asshole, but I think
I'm
she's
not going to call her an asshole,
yeah,
but here's the thing. If you're chastised and your response is to double down,
yeah. Mm-mm.
that's where, like, anytime you're doubling down on it, like, you might want to think, am I out of line here? And that's where, like, the initial thing, I'm just not going to get exercised about this poor. Yeah, was it the right choice? I just I just can't get all worked up about it. But the second one, even if your boss is out of line, you don't. No, no.
Yeah. Well, agreed.
Yeah, well, thanks again for another riveting debate. I don't know, funny debate, conversation, important conversation. I mean, you need to learn
Important
at some
No,
point.
it
conversation.
was just kind of a poopy conversation. Poopy. It's all poopy.
Thank you, Jamie Tart. I appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Please follow and share Veritas Views on the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for whatever the conversation will be. I'm pretty sure it won't be about poop. We'll see.
You never know.
Never know.
Thanks.
No guarantees.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael McBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. McBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. Here's that bonus conversation.
Gayle, we talked about at the beginning of at the top of the episode, we talked about moral injury.
Uh-huh.
What is it about that topic that you find to be either most fascinating, most interesting? What is it about that topic do you think people sometimes miss? Like what made you want to do the presentation?
That's a great question. I think
Hmm.
because when we think about and incorporate the concept of moral injury into the work that we do, it helps me feel like we're doing more complete work with someone. That very often, I do a lot of trauma treatment, and I find myself having conversations about, let's say, the harm done by the harm done, or the harm done by the inability to take action. But having a word or a term to give a client to say, that's what this is, and to be
Mhm.
able to name it is a really powerful experience and often lets them move through that last bit of work. Often it's the remaining work that's
Yeah.
undone. And I really do think episodic care is important. And so for me, being able to wrap up an episode of care and help people transition to moving out of therapy and terminating that episode is a good thing. And I think naming it and identifying it and having conversations around it is an important part of that.
Yeah. For me, it feels like a lot of times we forgive that really quickly. Oh, well, we talk about the
Mm.
trauma the person's experienced, then we talk about things they've done. Well, that's understandable given blah blah blah, and
Mhm.
we move on. And in our effort to make someone feel better, what we end up doing is negating their experience and not give them and we don't give them a place to process the intense feelings over those things. And so by naming it and calling it out and spending that time with it, I feel like I like your phrasing for it because I didn't come up. I like that better than what I had in my head. But that idea of completing the treatment by honoring those pieces that we
Yeah.
sometimes negate in our efforts to make the person less troubled by it, we negate the intense feelings they're having.
Yeah. And, really, I sometimes do these videos because we have a presence on TikTok and such. And every once in a while, I find myself compelled to do a little bit of a series that I call Confessions from the Couch. And so I'm going to give you a Confessions from the Couch here, which is, I think as therapists, we do tend to move past and, they're there. It's okay. Like it's understandable because we have discomfort with that. And
Yeah.
we come to like these people and want to help them and think the best of them. And we can move past it really quickly even just because we can sit with some discomfort of seeing this in that individual. And I think moral injury helps us remember to slow down and not move past it and forgive it really quickly and urge them to do so as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a really good thing to have a term for and to talk about kind of all around.
Excellent. Michael, take us out.
Sorry. I'm going to bring us back to one more thing really quick as a
Oh, a
bonus
bonus or a bonus
conversation.
conversation?
A bonus
Yeah.
conversation.
So while you guys were talking, and I definitely was paying attention, there was
Riveted, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I I was looking up the snowplow answer to the question. So what happens is every cycle, every year, MnDOT puts up 8 snowplows to be named for a contest, and those are either new ones or ones of the fleet that have not been named.
That's what I
Um,
wondered, right?
and they are MnDOT, so Minnesota owned, not necessarily the county. Sometimes the counties do their own things, but
Mm,
specifically the ones that are owned by Minnesota. And then if one wins again, like Betty Whiteout is one that has won repeatedly, and so
first,
has
anyway,
Snowy McPlow or Plowly
plowing McPlow.
McPlowface. They don't get renamed, and
Mm.
so of the 8, they win again and they keep their title. But then it means they continue to have unnamed snowplows that cycle through. So
Oh,
So
so
we'll
as
link to the name.
citizens,
We'll link to the actual like plow names because they're quite funny, but we won't go through all of them again.
right, but we as citizens could do more with our vote by not voting for plowing McPlowface because we already have that. And
You
so if
have a
we
plowing
really
McPlow.
wanted to elevate another name, we could forego that knowing it, we can be rest assured and sleep well that we already have one of those
Plowing
on our fleet.
McPlowface will continue.
well, and making the same joke over and over again. It's kind of what we were talking about in the first one, right? So
Isn't
were we
it?
being
True.
assholes by naming the same thing over and over again? All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Tuning in next week for a whole nother Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.